I'm here with the man responsible for creating more content in the back pages in New York City over the last few decades than Tiger Woods, Derek Jeter, Mark Messier, and Broadway Joe combined. The go-to New York City baseball columnist, Joel Sherman.
It's Be Your Own Fan TV with your host, Tyler Taminia. Sponsored by M-Style Marketing.
What do you think is the reason for why you have such a universal style with your writing and fan base? What contributes to that?
I think it's about the fans, really. You know, they're passionate, and so if you're passionate, you kind of meet their passion kind of halfway someplace. Sure. And I think that's really it. You know, this is a city that, what's the saying? All politics are local. I think all sports is local. And so people in this area, they generally love the Mets and the Yankees, and they're voracious about information, opinion, analysis, etc. And so if you kind of meet their passion, I think you can have a readership.
Yeah. About your hardball blog, you know, at times you're very brazen and very direct with what you have to say in that. Is that your objective with that blog? Or?
Yeah, I find, unfortunately, that more and more people are pulling their punches. And we do have to remember that the people we serve are our readers. I'll tell you my secret to writing, which is, it could be daunting. We sell 600 to 700,000 newspapers a day, right? Yeah. The theory is that 2.5 people read a newspaper. So, you know, in theory, about 1.2 to 1.5 million people could be reading just the newspaper. Forget about online, it could be 6 billion, right? Knock on wood, that should actually be the readership, right? But if you think of it like that, you could really throw yourself off. I always think I'm writing for my dad. If I write for my dad, I'll give my best effort because of how much I respect and love him. Yeah. And so he deserves my best effort and my truest effort. And so I always think, I'll write for my dad.
Oh, that's great. I know that. What's the best story you've ever worked on? Or the most fun?
Boy, that's a good one.
That's probably hard to...
It is, because I think the great thing about being a newspaper reporter is I wrote a book, right? It takes 18 months to write a book. And it's this unbelievable task, you know, because you only have one shot at it. The great thing about being a newspaper columnist is if you do great or poorly today, it really doesn't matter. You got to flush it. It's like being a cornerback who gives up a touchdown. Yeah. You know, you got to just forget about the last one and move on to the next one. And that's what I love about the newspaper business is it's not a story, it's all the stories. It's that there's going to be something fascinating that I've never heard tomorrow, a person who's going to tell me something I've never known. You know, I've covered baseball now for almost a quarter of a century. I know I look so young, stop. I've covered baseball for a quarter of a century, and yet I still learn so much about the game all the time. And it kind of keeps you coming back for more, is that hope of discovery. It's not what you know, it's what you might learn tomorrow.
Right. Well, you mentioned your book. Are you planning on writing another one?
No. It was just such an arduous task. I would have to find something I'm so passionate about, and then you'd have to create an 8th day in the week, you know, or move the clock to a 36-hour day because it's hard between, you know, your personal life and your professional life, then to do this thing that you want to do as perfectly as possible. Right. And then all of a sudden, you know, find the right amount of time for that. It's very, very difficult. And the truth is, it really doesn't fit my personality. My personality is a newspaper man. Let's do it today. Let's move along. Let's get to the next one. Boom, boom, boom. This one is like a whale pregnancy. You know, it lasts forever. So
give me a story that was probably maybe difficult for you to work on.
Well, not this winter meetings, but in the winter meetings of 2008, traditionally the New York Post sends 3 people, a Met writer, a Yankee writer, and me as the baseball columnist. And for budgetary reasons, they decided to send 1 person. And I know a lot of people have stayed up 50 straight hours in Vegas before, but never for the reason I stayed up for 50 straight hours. I was just determined, even though like most of my competition had 3, 4, 5 people there, that I wasn't going to get beat on something. And I had you know, there was a night where Brian Cashman left, the Yankee general manager, left the hotel where they were staying in Las Vegas. And I was actually fascinated by how not curious about that a lot of the competition was. And my thing was, the general manager doesn't leave the hotel and leave the city unless something's going on. And indeed, he was going to Northern California to meet with CC Sabathia. And, I just spent the whole night tracking and calling and calling and calling. And finally, I got somebody to say, we signed Sabathia tonight. And, it turned into a big story. But it was in the midst of, then Frankie Rodriguez signed like the next day with the Mets, and then the Mets made a big trade for J.J. Putz, and it was like by the time I looked up next, I had been up 50 straight hours, and I was like, this is pretty good. I think I put most of the caffeine-producing countries of the world out of business.
Right,
but,
right. Well, walk, maybe some fans don't know, but walk some of the fans out there through the process of, sometimes you don't even get assigned a story, maybe it just comes out of, but that news cycle, how it starts and ends with, your column. And
that's a great question, because it's evolving. Mm-hmm. Because for the first 2 decades of my career, you wrote for deadlines, legitimate deadlines for a newspaper. There's 3 of them, about 7 o'clock, about 11 o'clock at night, and about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And you write for those editions. But we're in a 24-hour news cycle now. Yeah. If you and I were sitting here and my phone were to ring, I hope it doesn't, because I don't want to interrupt this. It's so much fun, right? And somebody were to say, the Yankees have just done, or the Mets have just done. Right. We wouldn't wait till tomorrow morning's newspaper to break that story. I would go right now and write it for our website. And so we've turned into a 24/7. Ultimately, I found out about the CC Sabathia thing at about 3 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. And so there was no newspaper to write it in, and we put it up on the website, and kind of New York woke up to it, which was a first for me in that genre, but 5 years ago, 3 years ago, we would have had to see if we could hold on to that story for essentially 27 hours with nobody finding it out, which would never have happened. So it was a blessing to have a website and internet in the way that it didn't exist before. And, we're learning really what that's about. Guys like me who, you hate to think you're archaic at what you'd like to think is a still viable age to be working, but, I think 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds consume information in a completely different way than 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds. And we're, the average age of a newspaper reader in America is now 57 or 58 years old. Well, to be callous, those people are moving closer to mortality. And if we don't figure out how to get the people who are 20 and 30 and maybe 10 to 20 back into it. I know when, as a kid, there was a newspaper delivered to our house every morning, and when my mom and dad were done with it, I read it because I was doing what they were doing. I have a feeling that's not happening much anymore. No. People are getting all their information off a computer, off a cell phone, off an iPod, however they're getting that, and either you adjust or you go the way of the dinosaur. Right. And so I don't really want to be a dinosaur yet. So, you got to figure out along the way. And so I guess the very long-winded answer to your question is, deadline is now. Right. And now. And now.
Okay, well, this is our Be Your Own Fan moment now. Mm-hmm. I'm going to just quickly ask you a couple of questions, and then you just give me your answer. What's your favorite concession item?
Concession item? Wow, that's a good question. Can I say a beer about that big?
For sure.
Then that big.
A beer that big. Your favorite minor league park?
My favorite minor league park? I took my 5-year-old twins to see the Long Island Ducks.
All right.
Is that considered minor league, or is that kind of like?
It's minor. It's independent, right?
Yeah.
So, Major League Park?
I love the ballpark in Seattle. It's by far my favorite.
Do you have any rituals before you think about sitting down and writing something?
I'm sure I do, because I think,
We're in baseball, right? And there's always superstitions. And
I use a multicolored pen, like, for example, it's something I need with me all the time, because, like, when I keep score, I have, like, my own personal color coding that means something, because when you're writing on deadline, you want to look down and, like, so the strikeouts stand out or the hits stand out or something, and I have a whole color coding, which I'm sure the X-Files will take over eventually and figure out what it is.
New stadium, old stadium.
Yeah, I love the old stadium.
Yeah.
I really did. One of the things that made the old stadium great was it had kind of like that Roman Coliseum feeling.
What are some of your goals in the next 5 years?
This is going to sound maybe off target and lofty, but
I want to be part of the process that figures out how what we do survives and thrives again.
Yeah.
You know, I've been doing this long enough that I've seen the newspaper business at the very top of the mountain, and now I see us being called a dying industry. And I don't believe it. I know we're in trouble, but ultimately, people are going to want information, and the skill to be able to go get it and deliver it in a fast, correct, interesting, theatric, dramatic way is always going to be real.
We're actually going to head down to the baseball writers' dinner here at the Hilton in New York City. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned, and thanks for having being on here. It's great.
It was my pleasure, really.
We're your fans, so great. See ya.